sunglasses. They make me feel so cool. I feel like Tom Cruise every time when I wear them from Risky Business. I saw that movie when I was 12. Okay, let me put those away because we are actually not talking about those kind of glasses today. As much as I love Ray-Bans, we're actually going to be talking about ND filters today and why they're super important for your camera, specifically your camera lens. ND filters. Yes, this thing. Today we're talking about ND filters and why they are important specifically for exposure purposes. In the past, we talked about Aperture and what that can do for your footage to make it more cinematic by adding a shallow depth of field. I absolutely love Aperture. I think it's great. And I add it into a lot of my videos to add that cinematic charm. But you are very limited whenever you are filming outside. Whenever you're filming outside, a lot of light is coming into the camera because the aperture hole, your iris, is just really, really big. The lower the aperture number, the bigger the iris hole. So whenever that happens, you're letting in a significant amount of light and it overexposes your image and you basically can't use it. So how do you compensate for exposure when you have such a low aperture number? Well, if you're a photographer, usually what you would do is that you could just bump up your shutter speed. The higher your shutter speed, the more darker your image is going to appear. So if you're a photographer, you're totally gonna be fine in that realm because that just compensates for your aperture by using your shutter speed and it darkens your image. However, it's a little bit different if you're doing video, and here is why. So whenever you're making a video, you have the camera set to a certain frames per second. So for the sake of the conversation, let's just say that you had your camera set to 24 frames per second, which is the average frames per second for cinematic videos. Now, whenever you have this frames per second on your camera, you want to have your shutter speed at 50 or near there, because what you do is that you take your frames per second, you double that, and that is actually what your shutter speed is supposed to be in terms of what your motion blur is supposed to look like on a natural level. What you would do for your shutter speed is that you would actually bump that to double your frames per second. So 24 times 2 is 48. 48 does not exist within shutter speed variables, so it's actually just 50. So whenever you're filming in 24 frames per second, your shutter speed needs to be at 50. This is the same for other variables of frames per second. If you're filming at 30 frames per second, you bump that up to a 60 shutter speed. If you're filming at 60 frames per second, you bump that up to 120 shutter speed. Now, whenever you're outside and you're filming in the sunlight and you can't change your shutter speed, you can't bump that up to a higher shutter speed. Whoa, what? I was in the middle, I just want to film my video. What are you doing? I just want to film this video for you. I just want to film this. Okay, back to this. Well, okay, I need to.
We love our clients.
I just need to, I really need to. I need.
Hey, I have a good news for you. You're doing that. You want some water?
I
tell you.
Is it, can you?
No, seriously, there's wine.
That's right. That's right. I'll spit this water in your face. So if you're filming outside and you have this set shutter speed that you can't change because you have a certain frames per second you're trying to achieve, you can't change that shutter speed and get your exposure right. You have to keep it at that shutter speed. So if you're taking pictures, it's all good. You can just bump that shutter speed up and make your image darker. But if you're trying to maintain a certain aperture and a certain frames per second, you can't change that shutter speed, which is awful. And your image is going to look like this. So I took Jordan out to the park this week so we could test out the camera and lenses and just the different apertures that we could have in an exposed sunlight setting. And as you can see with this camera without an ND filter, just the camera itself, the lens at this setting, it's completely overexposed. And get this, the aperture wasn't even low. The aperture for this specific clip was, I think it was f20, f22. So knowing that that was just at that high aperture and the image was still exposed, that means that if we turned it down to an aperture of 2.8, the lowest aperture on this lens, you can't see anything. Nothing. So we don't have cinematic footage to showcase. So what do we do to compensate for this? ND filters. So ND filters are like sunglasses for your camera. You put these on the lens and it makes everything significantly better. You put these on your camera and it eliminates any kind of unwanted brightness that's coming from the sun or just in bright settings, and everything just is so much clearer. I can't recommend ND filters enough. They're something that you just need if you're outside filming a lot and you're trying to make cinematic videos, and especially when they're aperture based, you need an ND filter. You 100%, this is such a necessity. If you're buying a camera and it's a DSLR camera with a lens, buy an ND filter because you're gonna need it if you're filming outside. 100%. So yes, guys, that was my camera tip today on videography. Comment down below if you guys have any questions regarding any more tips for the future that we should talk about, any questions just in terms of editing, just anything video related. We're here to help you guys, and I like making these videos a lot. Thank you guys so much. I am Corbin Stuckey of AB+Production, and thank you for watching. Oh, and follow our Facebook page, obviously, and message us if you have any marketing needs. Ada loves her clients. Thank you guys so much.